Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. I suggest that it's unlikely that our recommendation here is going to necessarily move the needle, because this is already one of the most popular streaming shows on television right now. But we agree with that popularity, and so we are going to take the time to say a few words about how much Lisa and I have enjoyed watching the Queens Gambit. Welcome, sweetheart, to a Curating Your Movie Library segment.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I hope that it's okay to admit that this particular series is one that we started off with a difference of opinion. I was excited about it, you less so, and you graciously and kindly let me choose that particular night.
After 2 weeks of you saying, what about the Queen's Gambit? What about the Queen's Gambit?
And I was so pleased that you liked it. I mean, I liked it, but I was just so pleased that you liked it. And then it was you every night saying, what about the Queen's Gambit? Can we watch two?
It was compelling.
It really was compelling. And I think I told you that the one thing that made me skeptical, the one thing that made me fearful that you weren't going to like it, and maybe I wouldn't like it either, was how compelling can a movie about chess be? You know, chess is so complicated at the highest levels that, you know, there's not a lot of drama when you see someone just picking up a little piece of wood and moving it from one square to another. And yet, they did manage to make this really compelling. And one of the things that we've talked about a number of programs is how much we've enjoyed character development. And this was one of those, wasn't it? We get to see this young lady growing up. Now, another thing that should be mentioned is they did a I forget, I don't know what the right word for it is, but something that movies do where they start off with a scene sort of now and then take you back quite a ways and then lead you back to that scene.
They start with the past first. And
they start with the present first and then go back to the past.
Right.
So we start off meeting the lead character. She is in her clothes, in a bathtub, being woken up by someone, a porter at the hotel, and she steps out of this bathtub in terrible disarray, and you can hear her stepping onto empty bottles, and you're like, who is this? How did they get here, and where is she going? And that's what we get in that background. Now, tell me some of the things. I mean, when you're watching and you got that skepticism, talk to me about how that skepticism sort of dissipated so quickly for you. Why, what won you over quickly?
I think what won me over quickly was the fact that it didn't start off just some chess game.
Okay.
And the way that you had described the movie to me, I thought it was going to be so absolutely boring. But the compelling part was it started off so dramatic with her in the bathtub, and then you see her throwing on a dress and walking, and the paparazzi there, and she's getting ready to sit down, and it takes you back while she's looking at her opponent's eyes. She is remembering.
Yes.
And we go back into that memory. And I think seeing her life, I think that's what just really whet my appetite for wanting to see another one and to rush through, because seeing the tragedy and the mental illness of her mom and how her mom died and the fact that she was put into an orphanage and the way that she was treated, and seeing the relationships and the shocking things of how they would give kids tranquilizers.
Yeah.
And how she got addicted to those tranquilizers. And then when the state mandated that they could no longer have them, she was,
went through withdrawal. Yeah.
But just to see the people that, the children, or I think it was more like a youth that was over her. She was, what was her age? Like 7 or 8, something like that, when she went in. And seeing how the relationship developed with the janitor, that she had to go down and clean erasers, and I think all of that, and especially like fostering or things of that nature, are just they strike my heart with a sear, because those are the things that I am drawn to, and seeing the investment in a child's life in the scenarios that are played out.
Yeah, I think that there was some real intentional contrast there. Because I remember when she went downstairs to clean these erasers, she's in the orphanage, and she's got to go down into essentially a boiler room to clap these erasers. And she goes down there, and there's this old guy sitting there with a chessboard. I'm thinking, well, this is not good.
Right. You're thinking she's going to get molested.
Exactly.
She's going to get harmed.
And so then now as I'm looking back at it, I'm thinking, okay, they show her first in her home environment where the expectation and the image is she's going to be well cared for and loved. But she wasn't. Then you'd go into that situation and you think she's going to be mistreated and abused. But she was cared for and loved. The contrast and the use of this janitor as the one who discovers her skills and cultivates them and grows them early on is fascinating too, because she's going to be people are going to be skeptical about her because she's a woman. And in fact, what really captured me was that in the trailer, I don't know if you know this, but the trailer is mostly that conversation she has with the twins when she first goes into the competition. You remember? And they're all like, "We're going to put you in the junior varsity stuff because what's your score?" And her response is, "What's a score?"
Right. She doesn't know anything about chess.
Right. So we're going to put you way, way down on the kiddie table. And she's just so confident. So in the same way, you got this janitor who no one's going to think of as being a chess guy, but he's the one who finds her. He's the one who teaches her. And then she goes out with no sort of credentials or image as a player and just takes the world by storm.
Yes.
I think I told you I have this propensity of going and studying up on movies after we watch them. Yeah, and during, that's true. And you had asked if it was true. And one of the places that I looked up said, well, it's not true. It's not based on a true story. But there's a lot of intentional imagery of Bobby Fischer. And the irony is, in telling Bobby Fischer's story, from coming through a woman instead of a male like Bobby Fischer, they kind of tweaked Bobby's nose because he was kind of a sexist. So they were saying, we're going to tell his story, but we're going to do it this. Yeah, we're going to do it this way, and it's just really a compelling thing. And so we are at a time again. So let me just encourage everybody to
watch this.
The Queens Gambit. I
might want to watch it again.
Hey, dear. I'm down with that.
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
At the drive-in tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, sweetheart. Thank you again, and I love you.
I love you too, honey.
There's a difference between exposing a lie and censorship. We have seen in the last several months a great uproar being raised by conservatives that raises the alarm about the control inherent in successful social media sites like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And we are seeing increasingly that content therein is being managed, massaged, and controlled. And so Christians have jumped up and down, and conservatives jumped up and down and say, this is terrible, this is terrible. And it is terrible. But it's also terrible that when we're jumping up and down, we're mislabeling what's going on. I've complained for decades about the foolishness of the American Library Association, who every year devotes time and energy to its banned books list event. Because someone comes to a library and says, I don't think you should have this book, or a school board decides not to use this book or that book. Any number of things which have nothing whatsoever to do with the banning of books. It's hype. But friends, it's not only hype when they do it, it's hype when we do it. It's absolutely true that there's a bias on the parts of these social media sites. They're not honest. They're not open. And it's a good thing to expose that failure. But let's not call it censorship. They don't have the power of law to stop the spread of an idea. I'm not guilty of censorship by not having Joe Biden as a guest on my podcast. I'm not guilty of censorship by not inviting Kamala Harris to write a blog piece for me. In fact, when I served as the editor of Table Talk, one of my firm convictions was, I will not print anything anywhere in this magazine that I don't believe and that the head of this organization, my father, doesn't believe. We did an issue once on infant baptism, and you would have thought that we had, drowned a bunch of Baptists, because we had Baptist friends. But we said, hey, this is what we believe, and this is what we do, and that was okay. But what I can't do is take the position that those things that I have editorial control over are those places where I'm going to turn those places into a public square. I'm going to give every conceivable view liberty. I'm going to be a neutral platform. What you do have, and I don't want the government involved one way or the other. Not at all. But you have these organizations sometimes insisting we're just a platform, like a printing company, right? Nobody ever went to Quebecor, who for some time printed Table Talk magazine. Nobody ever went to Quebecor and said, how dare you promote this Calvinistic theology? Don't you know that we can lose our salvation? It just didn't happen because they're just printers. And so these social media sites, when they want to not get in trouble for being editorial, say, oh, we're just a platform. But when something comes along that they don't want us to see, all of a sudden they become editorial. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, we're going to be a platform unless someone tries to say this. You can't say, we're going to be editorial, but we're not going to take responsibility when someone uses our platform to say that. You got to choose. And we have to choose our words more carefully. We have the liberty to object. But what we're objecting to is not censorship. What we're objecting to is a posture that says we don't editorialize when they do editorialize. A posture that says we are neutral on these issues when they're not neutral on these issues. A posture that says we are equal and fair and above board in how we do all these things. They're not. Now, I haven't even addressed the issue of options and opportunities. There is an advantage to being the first to the market. Parler is going to have a hard time making a significant dent. But the more these editorialists editorialize, the quicker it's going to happen. So let's raise our objections, but let's speak them accurately. Why do Christians seem to be so prone to disagreeing with each other? We, after all, affirm the same book. We, after all, are indwelt by the same Spirit. We, after all, are being remade into the same image. So why is it that we can't seem to agree? The short answer is sin. Though our sins are forgiven, though sin no longer has dominion over us, though sin is daily being mortified in us, it yet remains and has power, which leads us to disagreements, to failures to submit to the Word of God in all that it teaches. How does sin lead us to disagree? Here are a few ways. 1, self-interest leads us into error. We all tend to choose our convictions not on the basis of arguments in their favor, but rather based on what the convictions will do for us. This can be something as crass as, if I embrace the view that babies are blessings from God's hand, I would have babies and lose my figure, to something far more subtle. If I reject dispensational eschatology, I won't get invited to speak at eschatology conferences. 2, pride leads us into error. We tend to choose our convictions based on how they make us feel about ourselves. First, if I have to change my mind about X right after you debated with me on the subject, it must mean that I lost a debate. Here too, however, we face more subtle temptations. Pride may lead me to think, hopefully subconsciously, if I embrace a young earth view, no one will take me seriously as a scholar. To be fair, it can also work the other way. If I don't stick to a young earth view, all my friends will think me a compromiser and a denier of the Bible. 3, sloth leads us into error. We tend to choose our convictions the same way water chooses its path. We go where there is the least resistance. More often than not, it is easier to keep our old convictions than it is to change them. Not studying an issue is easier than studying an issue. Being less than deliberate takes less effort than being deliberate. Number 4. Sloppy thinking leads us into error. Now, this is still the fruit of sin. Since the fall of mankind, all of us have had minds that have been fallen as well. We tend toward error simply because we are fallen. In the same way our bodies stumble, sometimes our minds stumble. In the same way we make mistakes doing simple math, sometimes we make mistakes in simple logic. Number 5. Finally, misplaced loyalty can lead us into error. Here we believe what we believe because we love whom we love. We fear disappointing family, friends, previous teachers if we depart from what they taught us. Loyalty, all things being equal, is a good thing, but not so much when it leads us to believe bad things. We do err, and we will err. We would, if we could, of course, jettison all the errors that plague us. Trouble is, to our fallen minds, the errors we believe look to us much like the truths that we believe. We do indeed have a perfect book. We are indeed indwelt by a perfect spirit. We are indeed being remade into a perfect image, which gives us cause to celebrate and give thanks. While we do disagree, what we share in common in the body is greater than that which divides us. May we all pray to the Spirit that we would all better believe the Word, that we would all better reflect the Son. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.